We are joined by Nina Davuluri, who won Miss America 6 years ago. And since then, she has added the titles of activist and entrepreneur to her resume. Nina, first of all, welcome to AVS. We interviewed you actually 6 years ago, the day after you won your title. So it's nice to have you back 6 years later.
It's great to be here. It's become a full circle moment since that morning after I won. So really excited to be chatting today.
I want to start by asking you first, how you are coping with this pandemic, with the lockdown. How are you keeping positive at a time like this?
Yeah, so actually I've been producing a documentary called Complexion over the past couple years. And the last place we filmed was in January in India and Bangladesh. And we were supposed to be in Africa, in Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria, and end at Cannes Film Festival throughout this entire lockdown period. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And so for us, we asked ourselves the question, what can we do right now? How can we stay positive? And we knew that we had quite a bit of incredible stories and content that we had filmed from the India chapter of just beautiful human stories. And so that's what we started doing. We felt that the world needed hope in a time like this, and that was kind of also the basis of Complexion, was sharing not only stories of colorism and how it affects the world, but obviously having that hopeful message at the end. And so that's kind of how we started editing and releasing Complexion, and I'm really grateful to see the response that we've gotten.
The main thing that I've seen most of the time on the TV channels, the advertisement of Fair and Lovely, which is the biggest example of it.
আমি এটা ইউজ করেছি কারণ আমার অসুবিধা হতো, সবাই আমাকে এরকম বলতো।
আমি ক্রিম মাখতে শুরু করেছি 7 বছর থেকে।
I remember her telling me that she used it and she was looking at the mirror once and she was like scratching her cheek up here and she was able to just about pull her skin back just a tiny bit because of all the chemicals that are inside this product.
The day after you were crowned, there was an Indian newspaper that had the headline, Miss America, Too Dark to be Miss India. I think we were all a little taken aback by that headline. What was your reaction to that? And how has that shaped the last 6 years of your life?
When I had read it, I think a flood of insecurities came back from the time that I was young, just from the comments that I heard growing up to I share a story about my college boyfriend at the time mentioning that his mother would think I was too dark if I met her. And so it was just kind of this flood of insecurities that I had experienced my entire life. And even at a moment like this, I couldn't believe that, wanting to become the first South Asian to win a title like Miss America, to be able to represent what was considered the ideal. This was an organization that only allowed white women to compete, and to have an opportunity like this, I was so grateful here because there were so many Indians that were celebratory of this moment and to have this representation. But of course, there was this other conversation too of, but is she beautiful for Indian standards? And so for me, it was really about taking that opportunity and using it to educate, recognizing that there were millions of young girls and boys who have been left behind feeling this way, that they weren't worthy or valued or seen because they were dark. And that's still a very true reality that exists today.
Her name is Ja. She's my best friend. The most bad thing that I face about her is that she is, whatever kind of a fight she's having, most of the time she's just spoken about her color because she's dark, of course. Whenever she's having a fight over any small stuff, people just call her as Kali, Chana and all. It's hurting because I'm her bestie. I can't hear that. The moment she was doing the ramp walk with you, it was lovely to see. But at the back, when I was sitting over there, the people were commenting and it was hurting because she is a part of me. She's my family. And I like her the way she is. When people comment, it's simply something that I would like to say, that people judge others by the color.
You've coined this phrase, colorism. It is now associated with this movement you've created. Define to us what colorism means to you.
Yeah, it means that white skin is considered the ideal. It's considered more successful, more valuable, more worthy, more beautiful. And ultimately, it's considered to have more opportunities if you're lighter skinned than if you are a darker skin complexion.
And you know what? Today on that stage, you were Miss America. I saw Miss America in you. And you were beautiful.
You know, the Black Lives Matter movement and these conversations about racism, have they helped kind of spur this thought of colorism and take this conversation to the next level?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it took the death of George Floyd, this Black Lives Matter movement, for us to address this in our own communities. And I think that when we started having very difficult conversations about race, we have to have them in our own homes. We have to understand what that looks like within our own culture. And colorism has been a huge part of that for generations on end. We can talk about colonialism and casteism, but ultimately we also have to recognize that every single person in our homes, as coming from a South Asian family, we too have also probably perpetuated this stereotype in some way, shape, or form. As subtle as a comment of don't go out in the sun, you're going to get too dark, is hurtful, is harmful, and we need to start looking inwards and correct those conversations in our own home.
A friend of mine once found her daughter scrubbing her skin, and she asked, why are you doing this? I'm trying to be white. And she then burst out crying, telling her mother, please tell me who I am.
And colorism is not something that just affects the South Asian community. I mean, this is prevalent even in the African American community, the Latino community. Talk about what you're finding through your research about how this affects kind of across the board.
Yeah, so when we started filming, we knew we wanted to film, of course, in South Asia, Africa, and East Asia as well. And this was because skin whitening creams are most prevalent in those countries. And as we kind of started filming and telling these stories, we realized that colorism exists in, of course, many countries around the world, but culturally it's different. So how it affects Indian culture is different in Africa, and how it affects African culture based on their traditions. And so in order to stay truthful to those human stories and experiences, we realized that this was not just going to be a one documentary. It had to be a series where each country existed as its own episode to be able to tell these stories.
I know some countries in West Africa where people actually pay for their wives to go and have treatment to become whiter than they probably are. The skin toning industries find ways and means, even when it is negatively affecting the skin.
Now, you actually started a petition against some of these major brands like Unilever, Pond's, Procter & Gamble. You know, talk about how this petition was received and what was the purpose?
Yeah, so the petition I started was called See My Complexion. And it was calling on the top 4 companies that had the largest distribution reach with skin whitening products across the world. That's not to say that this included all skin whitening products, unfortunately, but the largest conglomerates that did produce these, which was Unilever, which produces Fair & Lovely, Procter & Gamble, L'Oreal, as well as Johnson & Johnson. And simultaneously, this petition also called on the Bollywood industry to acknowledge and recognize that they too have also perpetuated this toxic stereotype in terms of casting. What you see on screen is so not reflective of what is the true skin colors of India. And so, it's their responsibility to uplift their own people as well. And so kind of seeing the way everything has evolved with the petition, and we've come to a point now where Johnson & Johnson has announced that they have dropped their line of skin whitening products, and L'Oreal and Unilever has stopped using the words white, light, and fair in their messaging and branding.
You know, we've been having conversations with a lot of actors in the Indian film industry as well, and they are very aware of this entire conversation around white and fair and light. Do you think that Bollywood is going to take notice, and do you think things are going to change?
Now we're in a time where, social media is a powerful resource, but simply posting a black square or using the hashtag Black Lives Matter isn't enough. It's how you're actually implementing that into your everyday life. How are you actively being anti-racist? How are you actively fighting against colorism within your own country and your own community. For me, I think it's not just the responsibility of one celebrity in the industry, it's the entire industry as a whole. You know, this is, like I said, from casting, directors, producers, song writers, lyrics that we hear in Bollywood songs that reference, you know, fair skin is beauty and the ideal. And we've heard it a million times and we've just become so accustomed to it. And it's time that everyone starts questioning it and recognizing that this messaging is toxic and it's not okay.
What are some of the things that we can do on a personal level? What can your fans and our viewers do to help eradicate colorism?
Yeah, well, the petition is still open, so of course you can definitely sign that. But I think more importantly, I think we have to ask ourselves why this has existed and why we have let it infiltrate every aspect of our society, regardless of class and socioeconomic status. It really does exist across the spectrum. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, if we're discriminating against our own community, our own people, how can we expect anyone else to you know, help uplift us? How can we expect that if we're also doing it inherently? So we have to first correct it in our own homes, and I think that's a more important conversation that we should be having.
Since I'm black, like wherever I go, some person will always come up to me and say, "Can you give me the N-word pass?"
What do you say to that?
Why should I give you that?
Yes.
Like wherever I go, there will be someone who will look at me and shout that N-word.
Here in India. And what do you do when that happens?
I don't do anything. Well, like, what should I do? Before, I used to hit people when they said it, but then my mother said that don't hit people when they say this kind of stuff. Just don't mind it.
Mm-hmm. But can you mind it? How does it make you feel when you hear it? You just ignore it.
I want to just end by asking you, you know, if you were to look back at your younger self, and you asked this question as well on your Instagram, what would you say to your younger Nina self about who you are and what you should believe in?
Yeah, I did say this, and I just think back to 8-year-old Nina, who went to the dermatologist asking if he could give me a cream that would make me lighter. And I wish I could tell her that everything that you've been told about beauty isn't always true, and that one day you'll be able to define it for yourself, understand what it means to yourself personally, and be able to change the world with that. And I hope every little young girl is able to recognize that they define beauty for themselves.
That person just called her Kali. You have originated from coal. Something like that. She felt so bad she wanted to commit suicide. She had locked herself in the toilet. I just said, "You are the only friend I have, please don't do this." It's so hurting. I just want people to stop judging others by their color. Because color and beauty isn't going to take you everywhere. It's what's inside.